Hi, I'm a retired professional triathlete, TJ Tollakson, CEO of Dimond Bikes, and today we're talking about drugs.
This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?
All the juice that you want on doping in the sport of triathlon. So the first question is there doping in the sport of triathlon? Short answer, yes. How prevalent is doping in triathlon? Well, that's complicated.
I had no idea.
Huh?
We just got done with the Olympics and everybody was cheering for these athletes from all over the world. And the Olympics can't go on and conclude without the question of several different athletes on, was that real or was that enhanced pharmaceutically?
Why didn't you tell me this before?
I didn't want to hurt your feelings.
And so now is a better time than any to take a look into the doping in the sport of triathlon. So there are two basic kind of categories in doping when we talk about how it works. And the first is actual doping. So that's like cheating using a banned substance. And doping in its pure sense is blood doping. So there's obviously the term you've heard of smoking dope, so that could also be doping as well. But blood doping gets its origins. It actually was done by athletes and it was part of USA Cycling's performance enhancement plan. And so yes, at one point USA Cycling had a state-sponsored doping program for athletes, specifically at the 1984 Olympics in LA. What is blood doping? So athletes would go to a training camp, probably at altitude, and they would see a natural rise in the red blood cell levels. Red blood cells are the cells that carry oxygen in your blood, so it's what allows your body to oxygenate all your muscles. Doping, either with artificial red blood cell increases or your own red blood cells, can increase your performance by up to 14%. So it can take a Joe Blow and make them a somewhat elite athlete. It can take a very elite athlete and put them on top of the podium and win a gold medal. Have a sport, have a contest, have a way for people to make money, and they will find a way to cheat. Sorry guys, but that's just kind of part of human nature.
That sucks.
The way that doping works is you would go train at altitude at your camp and increase the red blood cells in your body, and when those red blood cells are high, you would then do a blood draw, take your blood out of your body, okay? You would store that blood, then you would go back down to sea level or travel to your competition, and naturally over time, it's like donating blood, naturally over time your body replenishes all those red blood cells and the blood, the plasma volume, everything that was taken out of your body will replenish. And then before the race, you can insert that blood back in. But the bottom line is you can put more blood in, increase your blood volume, which is going to be a boost, but also increase your red blood cell count, which again can increase your performance by up to 14%. Doping your own blood is one thing. The next stage is taking an artificial blood booster. So the biggest one is EPO, erythropoietin. EPO is what Lance Armstrong used, along with a multitude of other drugs in his cocktail of choice. But EPO was developed specifically to help cancer patients. Ironically, EPO, one of the largest manufacturers of EPOs is Amgen, which is the title sponsor for the former Tour of California bicycle race. Coincidence? I think not.
Coincidence? I think not!
So EPO is a synthetic drug that naturally boosts your red blood cell counts. Those are kind of the two big blood boosters. Other drugs that people use to boost their performance, steroids. Okay, so steroids, we're talking about anabolic agents primarily. There are also corticosteroids, which are not anabolic, but can still be used in terms of doping and are still banned in certain circumstances. So we'll talk about the anabolic kind of steroids first. Anabolic steroids, those are the kind of steroids that big baseball players were using to hit home runs. But anabolic steroids, people like to think that that's going to make you big and bulky, and it will, right? Arnold Schwarzenegger admitted he used anabolic steroids and he was huge. But if you take anabolic steroids and ride your bike all day, run and swim, it may add some bulk, but really what it's going to do is help you recover. So that's why people choose anabolic steroids. People have been using anabolic steroids for years, not putting on big bulk, but feeling like Superman when they're on the drug. Next, we're going to talk about corticosteroids. So corticosteroids are things like asthma inhalers, medral dose packs, so oral, or you can have injections of corticosteroids as well. So if you get a cortisone shot, that's a corticosteroid, right? And cortisone shots are allowed if they're interarticular, meaning you put it in a joint space. Where they're not allowed is if you stick it directly in a muscle. You're also not allowed to compete with them when you take them orally. So if you take a medral dose pack, you're not allowed to compete with that. Because it's systemic. It goes through your whole body and gives you a feeling, as we like to say, makes you feel like a liger. Yeah, I said liger.
What's a liger?
It's pretty much my favorite animal. It's like a lion and a tiger mixed. Bred for its skills and magic.
The last kind of major set are growth hormones and peptides. So insulin is a growth hormone, human growth hormone itself, HGH. These are things that help your body repair cells, right? Not super common in triathlon, but not super rare either. So this is the other big performance enhancing arena. So what is a therapeutic use exemption? Well, a therapeutic use exemption is anything that's on the banned list by USADA. So USADA is the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. They're a signatory to WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Agency. And anything on their banned list, which they publish a new list every year, you cannot use either, and it'll specify whether you can't use it in competition or can't use it out of competition. So the exception to that is you can apply for not all things, but some things for a therapeutic use exemption, meaning your body is in a deficit or you have some health concern, and so WADA deems it necessary for you to use this drug to just exist as a human being.
I don't feel so good.
Now, the gray area in therapeutic use is a lot of athletes use therapeutic use exemptions illegally, or in my opinion, I guess I'd say illegally, but legally to gain an unfair advantage. So where does this come most prevalent would be the asthma inhaler. And some people might say, well, that's because athletes are working harder and breathing harder, and so they have more cases of asthma. Well, we know that's not the case. The general population would fairly well mimic what they are. So we know that corticosteroids do help improve athlete performance. Typically it helps with your metabolism and recovery. It also helps with weight management. So it came into huge scrutiny in the Tour de France. But yes, asthma inhalers are extremely prevalent at the elite level in triathlon, as well as running, swimming. I have one short story to say about this. Before the Beijing Olympics, air quality was going to be bad. USA Triathlon tested all of the athletes for asthma in attempts to try to get them on inhalers. Every one of the athletes was given the option to have an inhaler, and there was one athlete in that testing pool that refused the asthma inhaler, and that is Andy Potts, who is a Dimond sponsored athlete. I'm very proud to call Andy a friend. I'm also very proud of Andy's stance on rejecting the asthma inhaler. As a little sidebar on this, USADA publishes statistics on how many athletes have been tested. I'm going to read this so I don't misquote this, but in the sport of triathlon, there have been 4,285 drug tests that USADA has overseen. And of those tests, that has been over 639 athletes. So me personally, I attribute for 5. I've had 5 USADA drug tests in my 17-year career. I know what you're saying, that's not a lot of drug tests. You're right, it's not. Those are just USADA tests. That doesn't mean I was tested in competition or out of competition by Ironman or another governing body. It could be another signatory from WADA if I was racing internationally. So 5 tests in the U.S. by U.S. Anti-Doping. Andy Potts, on the other hand, is the most tested triathlete by USADA. He has 161 tests for Andy Potts. So I've got 5, Andy's got 161. And why the discrepancy? Well, part of it is because Andy lives in Colorado Springs, which is where USADA and USA Triathlon are based. So it's way more convenient for him to be tested. If I get a test at my home in Des Moines, Iowa, I got to get somebody who comes to Des Moines, Iowa, and there's not a huge pool of athletes to test here. So I'm going to be tested less frequently. That's just part of it. Which is also a tactic people can use to evade doping tests, because they can choose to live in an area where there are not a lot of USADA representatives to regularly test them.